My hero I'll be speaking about is Ralph Gibson. Ralph Gibson is an American photographer born in 1939 and is still alive today. Ralph Gibson started off his career in the Navy, and where he started off was in the printing department for 4 years with them as a photography assistant. Within that time, he actually learned quite a lot of the discipline of photography and what went into it and how to compose a shot. So when it came to time actually taking a photograph, he actually knew what he was doing and how to compose it, well, in his own vision, of course. After this time in the Navy, he had gone to art school in San Francisco from 1960 to 1962. After that, he started off his professional career with Dorothea Lange. Dorothea Lange was actually responsible for a lot of those photographs that were taken during the Depression. As you can see on the right-hand side here, some of the images that she produced during the time of the Depression. During this time that he had spent with Dorothea, she actually taught him this valuable lesson, which what stuck with him, was the photographer's point of departure.
During this period, Dorothea invited me to show her my work. And I did some of these early pictures here in this exhibition. And she said, "Oh, I see your problem, Raphael. You have no point of departure." I said, "That's true, Dorothea. What is a point of departure?" And she said, "Well, if you have your camera and you're going down to the drugstore to buy toothpaste, because you're directed, you have an objective, going to buy toothpaste, you might then intersect something worth photographing. But if you just walk around the street looking for something to shoot, you will never achieve very much." And so from this moment on, from 1970 until this morning, I am always working on a project with a specific point of departure.
He never considered himself really as a photojournalist, even that was the word of the day, and he never wanted to produce films or photography that were not his own narrative. And this was a bold move, especially a lot of the people of the time were taking photos on assignment from various people like Magnum or different newspapers would tell a photographer, "You just go down there and you do this photo." And Ralph didn't want that. He decided to go out on his own, and which he did. And he has done a lot of photography, like mostly monochrome work he's done. And a lot of it is mostly abstract work, where, as you can see in the corner of screen here, sides of portraits of faces, and he actually uses a lot of chiaroscuro lighting. Chiaroscuro lighting is an interesting one that was actually produced in the 16th century by the artist Caravaggio. And as you can see on the side of my face here, chiaroscuro, the lighting. And chiaroscuro lighting is actually being used in film still today, so methods from the 16th century are still being applied. Ralph Gibson applies this in his photography, and it actually is very, very thought-provoking when he does a lot of his photographs, and he leaves it to the imagination of the person who's actually viewing them, and which is quite interesting with all of his books and everything that he does. And he has produced his own autobiography as well, which is quite an interesting read, and that one is called Self-Exposure, which he had brought out in the last 2 years. This actually describes a lot of his life and in his own perception of what he wanted to do in his own photography. The camera choice from Ralph Gibson has always been the Leica camera. Ever since he saw the photos of Cartier-Bresson, he became inspired with the way that the photos had looked with the Leica camera. Ever since he saw the images of Cartier-Bresson and the images that he had produced with the Leica camera, Ralph Gibson had fallen in love with Leica camera and has never turned back. Ever since his art teacher at the time in 1961 at San Francisco Art School had loaned him a Leica M2. He'd first produced his photograph of a gentleman hiding behind an umbrella in Chinatown.
Realized this camera was capable of doing anything I was capable of asking it to do. When I ask myself why I've stayed with it for so long, I realize that it's a question of ergonomic balance, rhythm, power of the optics.
An interesting piece of advice from Ralph Gibson is that he speaks of finding your visual signature, so finding your signature that everyone will remember, and don't allow people to define you what type of photographer you are. You have to know what photographer you are, produce it, and then you reflect upon the world. And this is also what I enjoy about his good points about how he really despises iPhone photography, because they all look the same. So it's getting back to that rawness and away from the technology that he doesn't like, which I'm a massive fan of myself. And it's a great piece of advice that he actually gives to a lot of people. Ralph Gibson's career hasn't always been smooth sailing for him. There was a time where there was a turning point at his toughest moment had actually become his career-defining moment at the same time. He had 5 Leicas in the pawn shop, and he actually owed about 6 months of rent at a hotel. And he was rock bottom. He took a photograph of a burning beauty parlor, and he actually had been reminded of his mother, who actually was a beautician. He took this photograph and realized what type of photographer he wanted to be. Not a photojournalist, but an artist.